by the Depression. Couldn't get out of it completely. But the banking system, the monetary system worked a lot better than the US one did. Nevertheless, they created the Bank of Canada. Why? Well, that's such a good question that an article was published in, I think it was the Journal of the Money, Credit, and Banking. Why did the Bank of Canada emerge in 1935? That's the title of the article. And it turns out it's all politics. Just like we had a silver movement and a greenback movement, we had inflationists around in the late 19th century. They wanted more money. They thought if prices would only rise, everybody'd be happy. Well, there was a similar, even stronger movement in Canada afoot throughout the 20s. With Sylvia Giselle, the monetary crank, or maybe not Giselle, sorry, Major Douglas was the big figure in this. Anyway, you had all these inflationists around. They wanted the Canadian Treasury to issue more currency because it had been issuing some since World War I. Well, that would have been a recipe for very high inflation. So the people in finance who knew better said, well, we got to quiet these people down. We don't want to have the Treasury issue currency because that's really bad news. All right, we'll give them a central bank. Then they'll feel like they've got something they can play with, right? And then if they, potentially the central bank will give them what they want, but we know it won't. It'll keep it. And that's what it was. That's what the central bank was all about. It was all politics. No good monetary economics behind that move. So the general story here is that, unfortunately, a lot of economists, though, don't understand the workings of free banking. They don't take it seriously. They don't even bother to, find out what it is. And so they support the central banking because they don't know what the alternatives are. They've never really studied. Yes?
Let's say hypothetically, assuming we all agree that free banking is a better system. And so say hypothetically we had the political will to go back to a free banking system.
Not back, because we never have.
Right, okay. We have the political will to go to a free banking system. How could you make that transition? I understand how it could develop naturally and how you can make a transition to a central banking system by rule of law. Since you don't have rule of law, you can't have rule of law enforcing free banking. That's paradox. How could you transition to free banking without it being like this catastrophic time of turmoil or whatever?
Remember that free banking doesn't tell you what your standard money is, right?
Right.
Having free banking doesn't mean having a different standard money. So let's suppose we have the U.S. dollar, the supply of which is a supply that's only its scarcity is contrived by this institution, the Fed, right?
Right.
Now, let's leave that alone for now. Leave that alone, right? We know it's bad and we need to do something with it. But let's work on the free banking part. What does that mean? Well, it means get rid of reserve requirements, which half the countries on the planet don't have, and we don't need them. Get rid of any remaining restrictions on bank portfolios, right? Let the banks issue currency. Technically, the all rules against that have been taken off the books, by the way, but the Fed needs to issue a circular saying we won't come in and close that loophole if you start issuing notes. It's worth your while to do it. Get rid of all the barriers to freedom that have been in play, that remain in play today. But, unfortunately, the biggest departure from free banking right now isn't any of those things. The biggest departure is the system of government guarantees, starting with the FDIC, but also, importantly, including the implicit guarantees embodied in too big to fail and such. You can't have a good banking system, free or not free, with those kinds of guarantees. You just can't. As long as depositors and note holders, the people who actually choose where to put their money, are not exposed to potential losses from bank failures, you will have lousy banks. Because the money goes after the returns, and if there are insured returns, that's all it cares about. No one here ever spent a day, none of you has ever spent a moment worrying about the safety of your bank. Come on, admit it. That's sick. You spend tons of time. If you've ever bought a piece of consumer electronic equipment, you've spent more time than that. Oh, I don't know, but this one might, not have a good warranty. Bank? Oh, where's the highest interest rate? Okay, here, take my money. Right? This is a lousy system, a terrible system. Those guarantees have to be part of the reform. And the implicit guarantees are our hardest ones to get rid of. Now, there are ways politically you can move in this direction. Back in the 80s, when they were still regulating interest rates, I said, look, right, they're phasing out those interest rate rates. I said, look, don't do that. Tell people they have a choice. You can have competitive interest but no insurance, or you can have insurance and no interest. Don't let them have insurance and interest. That's a bad combination. But of course, they didn't do it that way. I think now, unfortunately, you might have to say, look, if you want to have an insured bank account, we're going to regulate the heck out of it. If you are willing to take a risk, you can have an unregulated account. And then we'll have a parallel system of bank accounts where there's the free banking, and then there's the insured unfree banking. Insured free banking, first of all, it's a contradiction because government subsidies are departures from economic freedom. Second of all, it's a recipe for utter disaster. And I'm afraid it's what we came closest to in the last couple of decades, right? We let banks be free in lots of ways, but then we insured them more. Well, I'm sorry, I like freedom, but not that kind. That combination is vicious. So those are the things you'd have to do. If you were able to do those things, you'd have a banking system that, like the Scottish system, could accommodate changes in money demand. Well, at that point, you can say, let's work on the FOMC and the Fed. Guys, guess what? We don't need you to make more currency at Christmas time. We don't need you to manage the money supply and fine-tune it for changes in velocity. We've got a banking system that can do that, thank you very much. And if you let these developments go far enough, you get to a point where you can put some, tape across the doors of the FOMC, tell them all to go home, freeze the monetary base, or have it increase automatically by some algorithm, by computer. And now you've gotten rid of the most dangerous part of central bank control of the base, which is the discretionary part. I don't care if you have a monetary base that's fiat. I really don't care. But discretionary control of fiat money, that I think is the problem. Because that discretion's been systematically abused. And they don't know how to do it right. I don't know if that's, something of an answer to your question. Freedom is needed so that we can have a system that can fend for itself. Once we have that, we can talk about limiting the powers of the Fed and maybe dramatically doing it because it doesn't need them anymore. It has no excuse for doing things that the private sector is now capable of doing for itself. Let me come here and then there. Yeah.
Yes, you said earlier that the Bank of England was established to finance a war against France. Would you argue then that a central banking system be necessary in times of war?
That depends on whether you think the war is necessary. Right? What did England get by invading France in 1694? I don't know. Do you? Not much, I suspect.
Let's say Japan bombs Pearl Harbor.
Well, I think that if you're a well-developed economy and Japan bombs Pearl Harbor and we put aside quotas, embargoes on oil and such that has something to do with that, then the answer is you tax people and you pay for the war the honest way and you declare the war honestly. If you've got to resort to subterfuges in order to finance a war, that sounds to me like it's not a popular war and maybe you shouldn't do it. But, of course, our government today won't even declare war, right? They won't do it. But if you set up a monetary system to finance wars, I got news for you. Maybe you can make the case that you're better off in wartime, but then you will want to have lots of wars because peacetime is going to stink, because you have a lousy economy. And that's not a price worth paying to finance wars. I think most studies show that, that inflationary finance during war times has also been a double-edged sword. But in the end, it's not clear it improves your financial situation to resort to the printing press. It's tempting for governments because they can. If they can't, they either don't have the war or they find another way. Yes, sir.
I just have a quick question off this, actually. Well, what if, let's say you have two governments, one with free banking and one with centralized bank. They go to war together. In the short term, the one with the centralized bank is going to win the war, because they'll have more, money to buy more supplies.
If it's true that resort to the printing press is really fiscally advantageous, that would perhaps be so. But I'm not sure it's true. I'm not sure it's true. Well, give me 20 years of peace with a free banking system and I'll pile up a war chest that'll beat the other guy.
As my original question was, if you're a free bank and you have to keep in a certain amount of money through the clearing